The morning sun cast long shadows across the palm-lined streets of Palm Beach, Florida, as Marcus Thompson carefully guided the sleek black Mercedes-Benz along the familiar route he had driven hundreds of times before. The polished S-Class sedan reflected the golden sunrise as it smoothly navigated the curves of Ocean Boulevard, its pristine condition reflecting Marcus's dedication to his job as Donald Trump's personal chauffeur for the past 5 years. At 7:45 a.m., the roads were mostly empty, save for a few early morning joggers and dog walkers who regularly dotted the wealthy neighborhood's sidewalks. Marcus had just finished his routine vehicle check at the garage and was heading to Mar-a-Lago to begin his day's duties. He was dressed immaculately in his pressed black suit, white shirt, and perfectly knotted tie, the same professional appearance he maintained every day. The flashing blue and red lights in his rearview mirror came as a surprise. Marcus checked his speed, exactly 35 miles per hour, 5 below the limit. He signaled and pulled over smoothly, positioning the Mercedes perfectly parallel to the curb. Through his mirror, he watched Officer James Mitchell emerge from his patrol car, one hand resting on his belt as he approached. Marcus had experienced similar situations before and knew exactly what to do. He kept both hands visible on the steering wheel, turned down the soft classical music playing through the car's premium sound system, and waited patiently. The morning heat was already building, and a bead of sweat rolled down his temple despite the car's excellent air conditioning. "License and registration," Officer Mitchell demanded, his tone sharp and authoritative. His hand remained near his weapon, a detail that didn't escape Marcus's notice. Marcus spoke clearly and calmly, "Yes, sir. My credentials are in the glove compartment, and my license is in my wallet. I'm going to reach for them now." Officer Mitchell's stance tightened. "Move slowly," he ordered, watching every movement with intense scrutiny. Marcus carefully retrieved his license and the vehicle's registration, along with his official Mar-a-Lago security clearance and driver credentials. He had learned to keep everything together for situations exactly like this. "I'm Mr. Donald Trump's personal driver," Marcus explained professionally, handing over the documents. "This is his vehicle, and I'm on my way to Mar-a-Lago for my morning duties." He pointed to the Mar-a-Lago security sticker on the windshield and his employee ID badge clearly displayed on his suit lapel. Officer Mitchell barely glanced at the credentials. "Step out of the vehicle," he commanded, his hand now fully resting on his holstered weapon. Marcus's heart rate increased, but his exterior remained calm and professional. He had been in law enforcement situations before and knew that maintaining composure was crucial. "May I ask why, sir?" Marcus inquired politely. "I provided all my credentials, and they're in order." "I said step out of the vehicle," Officer Mitchell repeated, his voice rising. "This is a high-value car in a high-security area. We've had reports of suspicious vehicles." Marcus noticed a few early morning walkers slowing their pace, phones gradually rising to record the scene. He carefully opened the door, keeping his movements deliberate and visible. The Mercedes' security cameras, installed at Trump's insistence in all his vehicles, silently recorded every moment of the interaction. As Marcus stood beside the car, Officer Mitchell began an aggressive line of questioning. "How did you get this car? Who did you say you work for? Why are you in this neighborhood?" Each question came rapid fire, barely giving Marcus time to respond, despite the answers being clearly documented in the credentials still in the officer's hand. "Sir," Marcus responded with practiced patience, "as my credentials show, I'm employed by Mr. Trump as his personal driver. This vehicle is registered to his organization. I drive this route every morning. You can call Mar-a-Lago Security to verify my identity." Officer Mitchell's response was to order Marcus to place his hands on the hood while he began to circle the Mercedes. "I'm going to search this vehicle," he announced, already reaching for the driver's door. "Stand right there and don't move." Marcus maintained his professional demeanor, but his mind was racing. He knew this search was unwarranted, and years of experience told him this situation was quickly moving in a dangerous direction. With measured movements, he reached for his phone in his jacket pocket. "Sir, I'm going to call my security team now," he stated clearly, making sure the officer could see exactly what he was doing. "They can verify everything I told you." Officer Mitchell's hand tightened on his weapon. "I said don't move." The morning sun continued to rise over Palm Beach, casting harsh shadows across the scene as an ordinary morning drive transformed into something far more serious. The Mercedes' security cameras kept recording, capturing every word, every movement, and every moment of what was about to become a much bigger story than a simple traffic stop. Marcus Thompson stood perfectly still as his fingers moved carefully across his phone screen, muscle memory guiding him to the number for Trump's head of security. The morning heat was becoming more intense, and the growing crowd of onlookers added to the pressure of the situation. Officer Mitchell continued his unauthorized search of the Mercedes, pulling open doors and rifling through compartments with increasing aggression. "This is Marcus," he spoke quietly but clearly into the phone. "We have a situation on Ocean Boulevard. Officer Mitchell, badge number 2574, has pulled me over and is conducting an unwarranted search of Mr. Trump's vehicle." He kept his voice steady, years of professional training evident in his calm demeanor despite the circumstances. From down the street, two more police cars approached with their lights flashing. The sound of their sirens caused several more residents to emerge from their morning routines, phones raised to capture the unfolding scene. Mrs. Henderson, a well-known local who took her morning walk at precisely 8 a.m. every day, recognized Marcus immediately. "That's Donald's driver," she called out to the gathering crowd. "He drives past here every morning. I see him wave to my grandchildren." Her voice carried across the growing tension, but Officer Mitchell seemed to ignore the comments from the bystanders. The two additional police officers, Rodriguez and Chen, stepped out of their vehicles and approached the scene. Officer Rodriguez, a veteran of the force, immediately noticed something was off about the situation. The well-dressed man standing calmly by the luxury vehicle didn't fit the profile of someone who should be under such scrutiny. "What's the situation here, Mitchell?" Rodriguez asked, taking in the scene with experienced eyes. Before Officer Mitchell could respond, Marcus's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen displayed Mar-a-Lago security. "Sir," Marcus addressed Officer Rodriguez, "may I take this call? It's our security team responding to my alert." Rodriguez nodded, while Mitchell objected, creating a moment of tension between the officers. Marcus answered the call on speakerphone. "This is John Kelly, head of security at Mar-a-Lago," an authoritative voice announced. "I'm speaking with Officer Mitchell, badge number 2574, correct? I have Governor DeSantis' office on the other line, and Mr. Trump is reviewing the live feed from the vehicle's security cameras right now." The mention of the security cameras caused Officer Mitchell to step back from the Mercedes, his face showing the first signs of uncertainty. The crowd of onlookers had grown to about 20 people, their phones recording every moment. Among them, a local news reporter who happened to be jogging by had already begun a live stream. "I can confirm that Marcus Thompson is Donald Trump's authorized driver," Kelly continued through the speaker. "He has full security clearance, and that vehicle is registered to the Trump Organization. I'm sending our security team to your location now, and I expect this situation to be resolved immediately." Officer Rodriguez stepped forward, taking control of the situation. "Mitchell, I think we're done here. All his credentials check out." But Officer Mitchell wasn't ready to back down. "We've had reports of suspicious vehicles in the area," Mitchell insisted, his voice rising. "We need to complete the search protocol." "What suspicious vehicles?" Mrs. Henderson called out from the crowd. "We all know Marcus. He's been driving Mr. Trump for years." Several other residents nodded in agreement, their murmurs of support growing louder. Two black SUVs with Mar-a-Lago security markings turned the corner, their arrival causing Officer Mitchell to finally step away from the Mercedes. 4 security officers in suits emerged, led by a tall man who immediately approached Marcus. "Everything okay, Marcus?" the lead security officer asked, though his eyes were fixed on Officer Mitchell. The growing crowd, the arriving security team, and the obvious support from the local residents had completely shifted the dynamic of the situation. Officer Rodriguez took Officer Mitchell aside, speaking in low but firm tones. The tension in Mitchell's shoulders remained visible as he argued with his superior, gesturing at the Mercedes and then at Marcus. Meanwhile, the Mar-a-Lago security team had formed a professional perimeter around the vehicle, their presence adding an official weight to Marcus's earlier explanations. Marcus's phone buzzed again, this time with a text message from Trump himself. "Watching everything. Stay calm. Legal team is already on it." The message confirmed what Marcus had suspected. The vehicle's security cameras had been streaming everything back to Mar-a-Lago, capturing every moment of Officer Mitchell's unwarranted actions. The morning sun now stood high in the sky, its heat matching the intensity of the situation. What had started as a simple traffic stop had evolved into a scene that would soon make headlines across the country. Local news vans were already parking nearby, their crews rushing to set up equipment. Officer Mitchell's actions, recorded from multiple angles by both bystanders and security cameras, were about to become the center of a much larger conversation about law enforcement conduct and racial profiling in Palm Beach. By noon, the Trump Organization's legal team had taken over one of Mar-a-Lago's largest conference rooms. Linda Martinez, the head lawyer, stood before a wall of screens displaying Officer James Mitchell's complete service record. Her team of 6 lawyers worked at computers around a large oak table, each focused on different aspects of the investigation. "Look at this," Sarah Chen, one of the junior lawyers, called out. 3 complaints of excessive force in 2023 alone. She enlarged a document on the main screen, showing a pattern that made Martinez frown. All 3 incidents involved minority drivers during routine traffic stops. The team had received unexpected help from an unlikely source. 2 hours earlier, a civilian police oversight group had reached out through their website. They had been tracking Officer Mitchell's conduct for the past 3 years and quickly shared their extensive files with Martinez's team. In another corner of the room, Tom Rodriguez, the team's data analyst, was creating a timeline. "Here's something interesting," he announced, pointing to his screen. "Mitchell was transferred from Miami PD under unusual circumstances. The official record says it was a routine transfer, but look at the dates." He pulled up 2 documents side by side. He was moved right after a major internal affairs investigation. Trump himself walked in periodically for updates, still angry, but now focused on building a solid case. "I won everything," he told Martinez. "Every traffic stop, every complaint, every time he's even been late for a shift. Nobody treats my people like this." Meanwhile, at the Palm Beach Police Department, Marcus sat in a conference room with 2 internal affairs officers. His own phone lay on the table, playing the crystal-clear security footage from the Mercedes. The officers watched with professional interest, taking detailed notes. "Mr. Thompson," the senior investigator said, "we appreciate you bringing this to our attention so quickly. Could you walk us through exactly what happened when Officer Mitchell first approached your vehicle?" Marcus's account was precise and professional, just like everything else about him. He described each moment in detail, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to Officer Mitchell's aggressive behavior in the video. The investigators exchanged glances as they compared his story with the footage. Everything matched perfectly. Back at Mar-a-Lago, the investigation had uncovered more troubling details. "Found his social media," announced Mike Wilson, the team's digital specialist. He projected several posts onto the main screen. Though Officer Mitchell's accounts were mostly private, Wilson had found concerning patterns in his public comments. "Look at the language he uses," Wilson pointed out. "Lots of coded phrases about maintaining order in certain neighborhoods. And check the groups he follows." The list that appeared made Martinez shake her head slowly. The team was building a comprehensive case. They had statements from witnesses at the scene, including Mrs. Henderson, whose morning walk had put her in the perfect position to observe everything. Her statement about seeing Marcus drive past every morning for years directly contradicted Mitchell's claim about suspicious vehicles in the area. Linda Martinez's phone buzzed with a text from the governor's office. They wanted a preliminary report within the hour. The political implications of the incident were growing by the minute. Local news stations had been running the bystander videos on repeat, and national media was starting to pick up the story. "Get me the police union rep's number," Martinez told her assistant. She knew from experience that these cases often hit roadblocks with police unions, but she had a different approach in mind. "And find out who's representing Mitchell personally. We need to talk." The investigation was also revealing support for Marcus from unexpected places. Other police officers had started coming forward, sharing their own concerns about Mitchell's conduct. One officer, speaking anonymously, described warning his superiors about Mitchell's behavior months ago. Trump returned to the conference room for another update. He stood silently watching the multiple screens, each showing different aspects of the investigation. His expression hardened as he reviewed the mounting evidence of a pattern of misconduct. "Sir," Martinez said, "we're ready to present our initial findings to the department. This goes way beyond just today's incident." She handed him a tablet showing a summary of their discoveries. "Officer Mitchell's history shows a clear pattern of discriminatory behavior. We have enough evidence to demand immediate action." Trump nodded, his jaw set firmly. "Make it happen," he ordered. And Martinez, "Make sure everyone knows. This is about more than just Marcus. This is about making sure it doesn't happen to anyone else." The evening news broadcasts across Florida led with the same story: shaky cell phone footage of Marcus Thompson standing calmly beside Trump's Mercedes while Officer Mitchell conducted his aggressive search. By 6 p.m., the story had exploded across social media, with hashtags #JusticeForMarcus and #BadGBS trending nationwide. In the Channel 5 newsroom, veteran reporter Maria Santos prepared for her live broadcast. She had covered police misconduct stories before, but this one was different. The multiple camera angles, the clear credentials that were ignored, and Trump's involvement made it impossible to ignore. "We're going live in 3, 2, 1. The producer counted down. "Good evening, I'm Maria Santos," she began, her voice steady. "Our top story tonight: a disturbing incident involving a Palm Beach police officer and the personal driver of former President Donald Trump has sparked outrage across the community." Behind her, the screen showed split footage from both bystander videos and the Mercedes' security cameras. At his home, Officer Mitchell watched the coverage with growing unease. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the incident. Fellow officers, once friendly, were now distancing themselves. The police union representative had left 3 messages, each more urgent than the last. Meanwhile, civil rights organizations mobilized quickly. Reverend James Carter, a respected local civil rights leader, stood on the steps of the Palm Beach County Courthouse, surrounded by supporters and news cameras. "What happened to Mr. Thompson is not an isolated incident," Reverend Carter declared, his voice carrying across the crowd. "But this time, thanks to multiple cameras and high-profile witnesses, we can show exactly what many in our community face every day." Inside Trump's media room at Mar-a-Lago, his social media team watched the coverage spread. Mike Wilson, the head of digital communications, tracked the story's momentum across different platforms. The view counts on the videos were skyrocketing, and influential voices from both sides of the political aisle were weighing in. "Sir," Wilson called Trump over, "your statement is ready for review." He handed over a tablet showing a carefully worded message that would soon be released to the press. Trump read it, made a few changes to make it stronger, then nodded his approval. Minutes later, Trump's statement hit the news. "Marcus Thompson has been my trusted employee for 5 years. His professionalism today proved exactly why I hired him. What happened this morning was a disgrace to law enforcement and our community. I stand with Marcus and demand immediate action against this kind of behavior." The statement sent shockwaves through social media. Trump's massive following ensured the story reached millions within hours. Political commentators scrambled to analyze the situation, noting how the incident had created unusual alliances across political lines. Local residents near the traffic stop location organized a community meeting at the Palm Beach Community Center. Mrs. Henderson, still in her walking clothes, addressed the packed room. "I've seen Marcus drive past my house every morning for years," she testified, her voice shaking with emotion. "He always waves to the children. To treat him like a criminal, it's shameful." The Palm Beach Police Department's Public Information Office was overwhelmed with calls. Their social media accounts were flooded with comments demanding action. Other police departments across the country watched closely, knowing this case could set precedents for how similar incidents were handled. Back at Mar-a-Lago, Marcus sat in Trump's private office, watching the coverage with a mix of emotions. His phone contained hundreds of messages of support from family, friends, and even strangers. Trump placed a supportive hand on his shoulder. "You handled yourself perfectly out there," Trump told him. "Now let the cameras do their work. Sometimes it takes a spotlight to create change." Outside the police station, a peaceful gathering had formed. People held signs reading, "Stand with Marcus," and "End police bias." The crowd was diverse. Retirees from Palm Beach's wealthy communities stood alongside young activists, all united in their demand for accountability. As night fell over Palm Beach, the story showed no signs of slowing down. National news networks had picked up the footage, ensuring the incident would be tomorrow's headline across the country. What started as one officer's poor decision had become a catalyst for a larger conversation about law enforcement accountability. In the quiet of his Mar-a-Lago office, Trump watched the coverage continue to build. Sometimes, he told his assembled team, it takes one clear example to open everyone's eyes. Mitchell didn't just profile my driver today, he exposed a whole system that needs fixing. The Palm Beach Police Department's largest conference room had never felt smaller. At 9 a.m. sharp, Police Chief Robert Anderson sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by senior staff, internal affairs investigators, and legal representatives. The Emergency Review Board meeting had been called with unprecedented speed, pushed by mounting public pressure and the explosive evidence against Officer James Mitchell. On the large screen behind Chief Anderson, the Mercedes' security footage played silently. The crystal-clear video showed every moment of Mitchell's misconduct from 4 different angles. The chief's face grew increasingly stern as he watched the footage for what must have been the 10th time that morning. "Let's review the facts," Anderson began, his voice tight with controlled anger. Officer Mitchell conducted an unauthorized search of a properly identified vehicle, ignored valid credentials, and escalated a routine traffic stop into a major incident. And that's just from today's event. Sarah Martinez, head of internal affairs, stood up next to a stack of folders. "Chief, our preliminary investigation has uncovered disturbing patterns." She began distributing documents to everyone present. In the past 3 years, Officer Mitchell has had 17 complaints filed against him. 12 involved minority drivers during routine traffic stops. The room grew uncomfortably quiet as the board members reviewed the documents. Captain James Wilson, Mitchell's direct supervisor, shifted uneasily in his chair. "I should have seen this coming," he admitted. There were warning signs. Linda Thompson from the legal department spoke next. "We've received notice that the Trump Organization's legal team is preparing a formal complaint. They have compiled extensive evidence, including witness statements from Palm Beach residents who regularly saw Mr. Thompson driving in the area." Outside the conference room, Officer Mitchell sat alone in a small waiting area. His usual confident demeanor had disappeared, replaced by nervous gestures as he checked his phone repeatedly. His police union representative, Mark Stevens, sat nearby, reviewing papers with a grim expression. Back in the conference room, the review board watched body camera footage from Mitchell's previous incidents. Each video showed a similar pattern: aggressive behavior, ignored explanations, unnecessary escalation. The evidence was overwhelming. "There's more," Martinez continued. "We discovered social media posts from Officer Mitchell's personal accounts that suggest clear racial bias." She projected several screenshots onto the screen. The board members' expressions darkened as they read the posts. Chief Anderson rubbed his temples. The department's reputation was at stake. National media crews had set up outside the station, and the governor's office was demanding hourly updates. The pressure to act decisively was intense. "Let's hear from professional standards," Anderson said. Captain Lisa Rodriguez stood up, holding a thick manual of department policies and procedures. "Chief, Officer Mitchell violated at least 8 department policies during this morning's incident alone." She began listing them: failure to respect valid identification, unauthorized vehicle search, excessive show of force, failure to call for appropriate supervisor approval, racial profiling. The list continued, each violation adding weight to the inevitable decision they faced. The board members exchanged glances, knowing that their handling of this case would set a precedent for future incidents. A knock at the door interrupted the discussion. An assistant entered with a tablet showing live news coverage. The story had reached national morning shows, with political figures from both parties condemning Mitchell's actions. Social media continued to explode with new hashtags and viral posts. "We need to act now," Chief Anderson declared. "This isn't just about one incident or one officer anymore. The public's trust in our entire department is at stake." The union representative, Stevens, requested time to present Mitchell's defense. But as he began speaking, the board member's attention was drawn to a new development on the news feed. Civil rights organizations had announced plans for a major protest outside the station the next morning. Chief Anderson raised his hand, stopping Stevens mid-sentence. "We've seen enough." He turned to the department's legal counsel. "What are our options?" The lawyer cleared her throat. "Given the evidence and the clear violations of department policy, we have grounds for immediate termination. The union contract allows this in cases of serious misconduct, which this clearly is." The board members began their formal vote. One by one, they raised their hands in agreement. The decision was unanimous. Officer James Mitchell's career in law enforcement was about to end. Outside, the Florida sun beat down on the growing crowd of reporters and protesters. Inside the waiting area, Officer Mitchell saw the grim faces of the board members through the glass walls and knew his time as a police officer was over. His actions, captured so clearly on multiple cameras, had finally caught up with him. At exactly 2 p.m., the door to Chief Anderson's office opened. Officer James Mitchell walked in, no longer wearing his police uniform, but instead a plain gray suit. His police union representative followed close behind, carrying a thick folder of papers that would prove useless in the next few minutes. The chief sat behind his large desk, flanked by the department's head of human resources and their legal counsel. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, creating long shadows across the room. The atmosphere was heavy with tension. "Officer Mitchell," Chief Anderson began, then corrected himself. "Mr. Mitchell, the review board has completed its investigation." He picked up a document from his desk, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. "The findings are conclusive." Down the hall, Trump's legal team sat in a conference room, watching the meeting through the department's official video feed. Linda Martinez made notes on her laptop while Trump himself stood by the window, unusually quiet as he watched the proceedings. "Your actions this morning," the chief continued, "combined with your previously documented behavior, constitute a serious breach of department policy and public trust." He looked directly at Mitchell, whose face had grown pale. "Effective immediately, your employment with the Palm Beach Police Department is terminated." Mitchell started to protest, but his union representative placed a warning hand on his arm. They had already seen the evidence, the security footage, the social media posts, the pattern of complaints. There was no defense that could overcome such clear documentation. Outside the police station, news crews had set up a forest of cameras and microphones. They knew the decision was coming. An anonymous source had leaked the review board's unanimous vote. The crowd of protesters had grown, their signs demanding justice and reform catching the late afternoon breeze. Back in the chief's office, Mitchell was handed his termination papers. His hands shook slightly as he signed each page. 17 years of police work ended with a few strokes of a pen. His badge and service weapon had already been collected earlier that morning. "You have the right to appeal this decision," the HR director explained, her voice professional but cold. "However, given the evidence and the unanimous board vote, I advise you to consider your options carefully." At Mar-a-Lago, Marcus Thompson watched the proceedings on a tablet while sitting in Trump's private office. He remained as composed as he had been during the traffic stop, but a slight smile crossed his face as justice was served. Trump ended a phone call with the governor and turned to Marcus. "Sometimes it takes someone with influence to make things happen," he said. "But it also takes someone like you, doing everything right, to make the truth impossible to ignore." The termination meeting concluded in less than 15 minutes. As Mitchell left the chief's office, he walked past the department's wall of honor, where his photo had already been removed. Officers who had once been friendly now turned away, not wanting to be associated with his disgrace. Chief Anderson made his way to the press room, preparing to face the media. His prepared statement had gone through multiple revisions, each word carefully chosen. This wasn't just about firing one officer. It was about sending a message about accountability. The press room buzzed with activity as journalists took their seats. The chief adjusted his tie, took a deep breath, and stepped up to the podium. Cameras flashed as he began to speak. "Today, the Palm Beach Police Department has terminated Officer James Mitchell's employment," he announced, his voice firm. "This decision comes after a thorough review of this morning's incident and Officer Mitchell's service record. We hold our officers to the highest standards of conduct, and those who fail to meet these standards will face consequences." In the back of the room, Trump's media team recorded everything. They knew this moment would become part of a larger narrative about police reform and accountability. Trump had already scheduled interviews with major networks to discuss the incident and its implications. Mitchell left the station through a side door, trying to avoid the media, but in the age of smartphones and social media, there was no hiding. Videos of his misconduct had already been viewed millions of times. His name would become synonymous with the very behavior that police departments across the country were trying to eliminate. As the sun set over Palm Beach, the news of Mitchell's termination spread quickly. Civil rights leaders praised the swift action, while police reform advocates pointed to the case as an example of why oversight and accountability were crucial. The story wasn't over, but a clear message had been sent. No badge was above the law. 1 week after the incident, Marcus Thompson sat in a large conference room at the Palm Beach Police Department. Instead of being questioned, this time he was there as an honored guest. Chief Anderson stood at the podium, addressing a room full of officers, community leaders, and press representatives. Today, we're not just offering Mr. Thompson an apology, the chief announced, his voice carrying across the hushed room. We're announcing major changes to our department's training and oversight procedures. Behind him, a screen displayed the new initiatives that had emerged from the incident. Marcus, dressed in his usual impeccable suit, sat next to Trump in the front row. The past week had transformed him from a private professional driver into a symbol of dignity under pressure. His phone still contained hundreds of unread messages from people sharing their own stories of similar experiences. Trump leaned over and whispered, "You're changing things, Marcus. Sometimes it takes one person standing their ground to make a difference." Marcus nodded slightly, maintaining his characteristic composure even as the chief detailed the department's comprehensive reform plan. The new policies were substantial. Every police vehicle would now be equipped with the same type of multi-angle camera system that had captured Mitchell's misconduct. Officers would undergo enhanced bias training, and a civilian oversight committee would review all traffic stop complaints. Furthermore, Chief Anderson continued, "We're establishing the Marcus Thompson Excellence in Professional Conduct Award." He gestured to a plaque on the wall. This annual award will recognize officers who demonstrate exceptional fairness and professionalism in their duties. In the audience, Mrs. Henderson wiped away tears. She had become one of Marcus's strongest supporters, organizing community meetings to discuss police-community relations. Her morning walking group had evolved into an informal neighborhood watch, documenting and reporting any suspicious police behavior. After the ceremony, Marcus stood in the station's lobby, accepting handshakes and congratulations from officers and community members alike. Young officers especially sought him out, wanting to learn from his example of staying professional under pressure. Back at Mar-a-Lago, changes were also taking place. Trump had ordered all his vehicles equipped with advanced security systems, not just for protection, but as a statement about transparency. He had also established a legal fund to help other victims of police misconduct who lacked his resources and influence. Mr. Thompson, a young black police cadet, approached him after the ceremony. "Your story is why I decided to join the force. We need to change things from the inside." Marcus shook the cadet's hand, seeing the determination in his eyes. The media coverage had evolved from reporting on a single incident to examining broader issues of police reform. National news programs regularly invited Marcus to share his perspective, though he carefully chose which invitations to accept. His message remained consistent. Professionalism and dignity were the best responses to prejudice. Former Officer Mitchell's story took a different turn. Unable to find work in law enforcement, he had moved to another state. His case became a cautionary tale in police training sessions across the country, his body camera footage used to show officers what not to do. The Palm Beach Police Department's new policies became a model for other departments nationwide. Police chiefs from other cities visited to study their reforms, particularly the Civilian Oversight Committee and enhanced training programs. The Marcus Thompson protocols became shorthand for professional police conduct. Trump organized a dinner at Mar-a-Lago to celebrate the changes. Community leaders, police officials, and civil rights activists sat together, discussing ways to build on the progress. Marcus, seated at the head table, spoke briefly about the importance of turning a negative experience into positive change. "What happened that morning was unfortunate," he said, his voice steady and clear. "But look at what it led to. New policies, better training, stronger community relationships. Sometimes it takes a moment of darkness to show us the way toward light. As the evening ended, Marcus drove Trump home as he had done countless times before. But now, other drivers on the road sometimes recognized him and waved. Local children pointed him out to their parents. He had become more than just a driver. He was a symbol of dignity and change. You know, Marcus, Trump said as they pulled into Mar-a-Lago's gates, some people would have let that morning break them. You turned it into something that's helping others. That's real leadership. Marcus parked the car in its usual spot. The security cameras now a familiar presence. As he stepped out into the warm Florida evening, he allowed himself a small smile. The incident that could have ended his career had instead launched a movement for positive change. Sometimes, he reflected, the worst moments could lead to the best outcomes.